Oh, welcome back to the studio. My name is Monica, and today I thought we would do something a little bit of a departure from the miniatures that we've been painting for the last month or so. And I think I'm going to probably wrap up that series. I might be compelled to do some here or there, but I think I'm going to take those miniatures and actually list them on my website for sale. So if you're interested, those will probably be up sometime next week, and I'll leave the link in the description box below. But today I've got out my nature journal, and I have just recently started another sketchbook for a class that I'm taking through Ivy Newport's platform called Studioworks. She has started a sketchbook society. So we're all taking a class together and using a sketchbook to kind of document our daily things. You're going to hear my dog in the background, Maisie. There's people outside, so Um, but today I thought I would like to work in my little nature journal, and this one is kind of like a little one-off. I add things in here as I go. There really is no rhyme or reason, except that it all has something to do with nature. And so I have all sorts of different things in here. And today I would like to do a spread that's dedicated to the first flowers of spring. And we have had a really wet, cold spring here in northern New York. And when the first flowers came out, it was really exciting. So I took a ton of pictures, and even though we're pushing the end of May, I wanted to get these documented in my nature journal. And so that's what we're going to do today. And I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of how I'm going to lay it out, and then go over some of the little tips and tricks that I use for watercolor and for sketching things out. And I think what I'm going to start off doing is I'll start adding in the flowers here at the bottom, the different types of flowers, and I'll keep my text up here at the top. And I'll make sure that each of these is labeled so that I know what they are. And then I'll probably add the date that I took the photograph next to these flowers. So first up is I'm going to sketch with a pencil, and then I'm going to go in with my micron pens, and then I'll finish these off with some watercolor. So let's go ahead and get these sketched out. So I have finished sketching all of this in pencil, and it's a little bit of a mess right now, and I actually drug my hand through the graphite over here. If that happens, you can always take your eraser and just blot up some of these areas. The next thing I'm going to do is go in with my micron pens and start outlining, detailing, and putting a little bit of texture in here. And then I'll go through and erase everything out. Um, a little bit of a tip when you're sketching flowers or anything, start with the basic shape. So if you're sketching a flower like this one, sketch in the cup shape first, and then you can start adding in the petals, and then, the pistils and stamens and all of the little bitty details, these leaves. After you've got the big shapes in, it makes things a little bit easier. These flowers that I'm sketching in, these are relatively small flowers that grow in different environments. This bloodroot, for example, I found in a really leafy area, so this is going to be kind of like a mixed environment. This Speedwell is found more in a grassy kind of environment, and then I found, I believe this is is this a Carolina Beauty, or I believe it is a Carolina Beauty, if I'm not, or a Virginia. Let's see, this is a Carolina Spring Beauty. So this one I found kind of tucked away next to, kind of like in between two roots of a tree. It was really leafy, and the bark next to it was really beautiful. So I'm gonna have like some different environments going on, but I thought it would be fun. And these are also a lot bigger than they would actually be found in nature, which is fine. This is my nature journal, so I know that they're not this big. And if I wanted to, I could also annotate the size if that was something I wanted to do. But like I said, the next thing I'm going to do is grab my Micron pens. You don't have to have Microns. You can use any sort of pen. If you're going to use watercolor over it, obviously, make sure that they're waterproof. So I'll get started with that next. All right, so I have all of the line work done with my pen, and now I'm going to go in and start adding some watercolor to this. And I'm going to start in the background, and I'm not sure if I want to do this. I might do some blues and then move into some greens for the background. Just do a really nice kind of a wet in wet thing. And we're going to start on this side with these Carolina Spring Beauties, and then move on to the Coltsfoot. I'm going to keep this all very muddy looking down here because this is all dirt and leaves. And as I move over to the right side, then we're going to move into some grassier pieces and some green leaves. So there will be a little bit of a transition as we paint this. So I'll speed this up and slow this down as I find necessary, or if I think there's something that, you know, I want to pass along. And yeah, so just, I guess, hang back and enjoy the process. Okay, so I thought I would slow this down a little bit so I can just kind of show you what I've done so far. I was working on these trout lilies in the background, and I used a lot of red and a lot of green. And well, some of this red is a little bit too punchy for me. And I can always glaze back over this with some green, and that will help desaturate it a little bit. Okay, so I went into these flowers, these Spring Beauties, with a little bit of gray. They're a very light, I would say, white flower with some pink accents. So I think on the inside of some of these petals, I'm going to go in and add a light wash of pink. And then when that's dry, I'll go back in and add the actual lines. And I might not wait until it's completely dry because I want the lines to be just a little bit blurred out. And I'll make a second pass on these stems so that I can get the shadows in. And then I'll start on the Coltsfoot. So right now I'm just waiting for my first pass on this Coltsfoot to dry, and I'm going to go ahead and add in some of this foreground color, and it's a little bit of yellow ochre, and I added some purple in there to desaturate it, make it a little bit darker. This color reminds me of like the leaf litter. It's a nice tan color. And I'm just going to lay this in here. And then I think I'm going to make this area a little bit darker so that it reads more like the soil as opposed to a bunch of leaves. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm noticing that this paper I'm using dries really quick. So by the time I go in here and try to lay in another color on top of what I just painted, it's already dry. And that's not a problem. I'll just wait until this completely dries, and then I can sort of like do a dry brush technique on top. And that'll help give it some texture too. So I'm going to dry that, and then I think actually before I dry that, I'm going to continue on and just finish this part of the page here. Okay, so I'm going to clean off one of these little spaces in my palette here, so when I lay in my yellow, start working with my yellow, I have an area that's completely dedicated to yellow without anything to muddy it up. So I'm going to work with my lemon yellow. I think this is a Hansa yellow light, and some of this New Gamboge mixed together to give myself kind of a middle yellow. And then I am going to do a wash over this entire flower. I have some areas here that have some of these purple leaves that are sticking out that I still need to go over and add in. And if you're journaling and you're doing your watercolor and you notice that you have some of these hard edges here from the background, you can just take a damp brush and scrub these areas out so that it's not quite so obvious that you didn't go all the way up to the flower. I'm just gonna soften those. Okay, so the next flower up is this Bloodroot, and I have some leaves, some dead leaves around it, and it's always a little bit difficult when you come back on a separate day to figure out what you drew, especially when it's something like this, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to start with this green leaf that's wrapped around the stem, and the white on this flower, I'm going to be a little bit more subtle with my shadow tones than I was over here. And hopefully that will help it read a little bit better as white. So I think I'm going to start by adding in some of this green gold to the inside part of the leaf. And it's pretty much this whole back part. And I'm coming back to this after a day or so and working on it. And sometimes it's a little difficult to be inside and paint. So I was thinking for maybe some of the videos in the future, since it's so nice here, that I would film outside. I'll see how that goes. I don't know. We'll give it a shot though. So, okay, I'm gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna move on to adding these shadows in. And I'm going to use a really watery gray. And there's a definite shadow under this part, and then there's a little bit of a shadow here. And if something like that happens, I just touch the wet part of this paint. I'll just grab a piece of paper towel and blot it right out. So I should be able to go over to the other side here and very carefully drop in a little bit of gray. And I'm going to add in some yellow down here at the bottom while this is wet. And that's what I'm seeing. And the shadow is definitely darker underneath this right here and down here. The shadows are a little bit lighter on these petals here, but I still want to incorporate some So what I'm doing right now is I'm going back over the inside part of this leaf, and I'm skipping the areas that are the veins, which are very light in color. They're like yellow. So I am just skipping around those parts so that it appears to be some veining. And while that's wet, I can drop in some blue into some of these more shadowy areas, especially down here. And as it starts to get up towards the top, it gets lighter. And to give this leaf texture down here, I added in a couple of different colors, and then I just dropped some water in with my brush. So I'll probably be doing the same thing to some of these leaves here. Maybe I'll wet this one and start dropping in some different colors just to give it a little bit of variation, and then I can go back in and start adding a little bit of shadow to these. So the outer edge of this leaf is a lot lighter in color, and not only is it lighter, but it's a lot cooler. It's a really cool, almost a minty type of green. And I always find, I like to start off with like a phthalo blue, and then mix in a little bit of this Hansalite, and I'm gonna need a lot more yellow. And if it's too vibrant when you're mixing these colors, you know, sometimes I get a color that's, it almost is appearing neon in color. Then what I can do is just add the complement. So maybe I'll pick up a little bit of alizarin crimson and add some of that in to desaturate it just a little bit. And if you keep a scrap piece of watercolor paper, you can test out your colors. And to me, that's just really, it's too much yellow in that. I might add a little bit more blue. And that's a little bit too blue, so I'll go back in and add a little bit of yellow. And I think that's a little bit better. That's more of where I want it. Greens can be kind of funny to mix. And it just takes a little bit of practice and playing around, I think, with mixing colors. And it's fun to mix colors and see what you get. I'm going to start off with a really, really light wash because there are some really light areas in here. And I'm just going to paint right over the entire leaf. Now the veining on this side is actually darker in color, so I can use those pen lines as the veining. And I can always go in and strengthen those lines too. Or I can add color if I wanted to. So I can give that a second to dry, and maybe I'll move on and do some of these grasses that are over here next to the Speedwell. And I actually need to find my reference photo for, I might go ahead and just do this for the leaves as well, because they're very much the same green. So we can just work on all of this at the same time. Okay, so I think I'm pretty much done painting, and if I wanted to, I could go back in and add some more detail with my pen. But I think what I'm going to concentrate on now is adding in my text, and then I want to make sure that I identify all of the flowers that are in this spread. And I just wanted to mention also that this particular journal, it's very inexpensive. It is watercolor paper, but it is not 100% cotton. And if you've worked on 100% cotton paper, you will notice the difference. The paint does not want to spread, and you have to kind of work with it a little bit with your brush to spread it out. And it just doesn't have the same look as 100% cotton paper does. And when I first discovered this, it was in a different journal, but this is a bigger journal, but it is the same brand and it's the same paper. And I first discovered this when I did these feathers, and this was a while ago. But I just thought, well, I feel like I can't paint anymore. And it was not me, it was the paper. So these are feathers that I did on a different type of watercolor paper, and I cut them out and stuck them to this paper. So keep that in mind, that when you're working on more inexpensive journals, that you're not going to have the same kind of feel as you would the 100% cotton, but they are really great buys to work in and practice in. And this isn't my nature journal, so I'm totally cool with this. I have to work a little bit harder to get you know, some of the things that I want with my watercolor, but it's fine. It serves its purpose, and don't let that deter you from getting outside and working on your nature journal. So I think the text that I want to put in here is, I want to do something about first flowers of spring. That's probably what I'm gonna call this spread. And I want to put this right across the top. And most of these flowers I found on a specific day. So I'll probably put that date in here, and then I'll label each one of the flowers. So I'm going to probably speed this up, and you can watch me do all of the lettering. So I am finished with the lettering, and what I did is just laid out some guidelines, and I can see I've got actually some lines that I still need to erase. So I laid out these guidelines, and then I start off with a skeleton letter and go back in and kind of fill it out and add some serifs to it. I left these open so that I could add a little bit of color to them. And I did that with my watercolor, and I used a brush marker to add a little bit of shading underneath the date and the word spring. And then I just took my micron pen and went back in and labeled all of my flowers. I could definitely go back in and maybe add a few more details with my pen, but I think for now I'm going to call this finished. I hope you had a good time watching this. I hope there were some takeaways for you, and it inspires you to grab your sketchbook and get outside. It's a great way to build your creative practice. This is your journal, you know, nobody has to know, and it's a great way to learn too. I really like learning about the plants and the animals that live near me. So if you've got any questions, you know, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and stay tuned. We're going to be doing more sketchy sketchbook kind of stuff in the near future, so I hope you'll stay tuned. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to see more videos. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.